Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they move through their pain, they realize that something worthwhile, something for the greater good, could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this: a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesandgrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesandgrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. Greetings, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today to Heroes in Grief. And as always, I appreciate you so much being here, watching, listening, whatever the case is. And today I have Emilio Parga with me. And Emilio is from Reno, Nevada, but he's currently in Montreal. You're doing a presentation there. Is that correct?
Yeah, on death in sports, actually, death in sports.
Yeah. So Emilio he's an educator, and he is a presenter, and he also is founder of the Solace Tree, which is the the website is just solacetree.org. And so that's SOLACETREE.org. And that'll be in the show notes, of course, too. But you can look it up as we're talking here if you like. But Emilio is focused on some specific things. And it's very awesome that you work with grief and trauma with numerous groups. But you focus on children and sports, involved with sports teams and things like that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great. So if you don't mind, I don't know if you have a grief story that brought you all into this, or how you got involved with the work, or why you are focused in that area. Maybe tell that story, and then we want to definitely focus on all the great things that you're doing and direct people to that. So if you don't mind sharing with us, appreciate to hear the story of how you got going with all of this stuff,
Yeah. Tom, thank you for what you've done too. I looked at all your podcasts. I listened to a few. I perused some of them. And wow, you're doing amazing things too. And there's some amazing people out there doing just great things. And I call it doers. They're just doers. They're doing the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's either part of their ministry, or they were born this way, or something happened, and they're just contributing to society. And it's just their community, but society as well. So I love all the work that you guys are doing over there, Tom. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
So it's a long story short. Growing up, my father died at age of 10. I was in sports, and that helped me get through it. Then my mother abandoned me at age 12. So I was dealing with death, grief, loss, abandonment, neglect, some abuse. I was struggling. I ended up becoming a teacher. High school was pretty hard for me. Ended up becoming a special ed teacher, regular ed teacher, school counselor just before the year 2000. Doing the work today because of 9/11. When I was a school counselor in my school, first of all, there was no training at the time in 2001 for teachers and school counselors, going through this system. And so I wanted to do something different because that was pretty rough on all of us at this school I was at. I was at like kind of a white school and a Latino school. And I was doing both, part-time counselor, consultant, teacher. I was doing a lot of different things. So I started to look up, how do you help kids deal with grief, talk about death, have their parents, etc. I came across the Dougie Center in Portland, Oregon. And I went up there and they trained me and they've been good to me. And so I'm indebted to them for learning about the Dougie Center ways and then, spreading the news and starting grief centers in Nevada and in New York after 9/11. And then we started this nonprofit called the Solace Tree. And it's a nonprofit, built after or modeled after the Dougie Center in Portland, Oregon. And then things started happening. We were just seeing children, teens, and adults. Then we started doing grief in the workplace. Then we started going in the hospitals, emergency responders, and we were seeing athletes and teams, and it just started to build. Then we were doing grief camp up at Lake Tahoe on the Nevada and California side. So it wasn't like we had the money and we were just thinking, what should we do? It started to happen organically, which was just awesome. The pandemic happened, long story short, and there was just more needed, more services. Now we work with hospice and the hospitals now, because we're able to get in and see people in their home. Grief in the workplace is big for us, but we're still seeing children, teens, and adults, in our organization and group session, peer support group model. We started a program, though. It was one of my favorite things we ever did outside of the grief camp in Lake Tahoe. It's called the Good Grief Club. The Good Grief Club. And we go into schools and we work with kids and we do PDs for schools. We work with kids all ages, K through 12. But what was happening, we found out about 18, 19 years ago, that kids were like, well, at the Solace Tree, hi, my name is, and I'm here because, but I don't really want to talk about that. And a lot of it was, Tom, because we gave them permission to grieve. And it was an awesome opportunity for them to say, well, I'm here, but I don't want to talk about it because I've been talking about my dad who died. It's been months now. I do want to talk about my mom's new relationship that she's in, and the guy she's with, he's kind of been abusive. So it really opened up for our Good Grief Club incarceration, abuse, deportation, foster care, any type of grief, and then all death, of course. And it's just been such a great opportunity for us just to work with the schools, work with businesses, work with families outside of the school. I've always said we're a complement to school counseling. I'm a school counselor. But if those schools didn't let us in, if we didn't have the volunteers and the board members, we'd be nothing. We're all part of it. We're all part of it. We're all contributing. And we know that we're contributing to this community that we live in, Reno, Nevada, and the surrounding counties. But not everybody's going to die in Reno. So we're contributing to, we believe, society, because they will move on from this help and help others. And we know this now because they become volunteers, or we get a phone call or an email and they say, I'm a nurse in Texas, or I'm a therapist in Arizona. And that's what's been great. They've paid it forward. We've helped them get there. And it was really just listening, being present, and having, space for them.
Yeah, the ripple effect, right? That's great.
Yeah.
So did you find out, you were talking about like the kid who talked about the abusive step-parent or whatever the case was. But so, kids, maybe they have unresolved grief, right? And then so these other things are coming out. Is that what you're saying? Like they just start talking about these other things, not realizing that it may be, an upbringing from the grief that maybe they didn't deal with in the past and that type of thing. Of course, that can happen. So is that kind of circumstance you're speaking of there?
Yes, and I have to say, we used to use that word until the pandemic, because when the pandemic happened in 2020, all of a sudden people were like, we just have all this grief to process because, well, we had those deaths before, they weren't worked on, and now we need to work on all of it, and now we've got COVID and all these other things. So we were finding out that teenagers and adults and middle adulthood and late adulthood were still trying to process all that grief from the Vietnam
Mm.
War, from 85, 2009. And so, yeah, it's just we call it unprocessed or unaddressed grief. Unprocessed mean they never really got a chance, but unaddressed was like my story from this gentleman who served in Vietnam after his son died. Never really processed the war, only with his buddies, but never talked about it with anybody until he came to the Solace Tree. He was in the 70s, and now he's like, I need to start talking about some things because I know you all listen, but I miss my son, and I've talked about him now. It's been months, but I'm getting older. I have cancer. I kind of want to talk a little about the war and how it kind of affected me. I never got to talk about it. So it's just been a journey, to help these individuals know that they have that safe space and can start processing, years later, all their
Yeah.
grief.
Those things, everything you talked about is really, and I kind of blossomed into this myself as I started this journey. My son passed 2.5 years ago, a little over 2.5 years ago now, 27 years old, fentanyl. And so the podcast came out of that. I was just compelled to want to help people. And I have some background in things. I was a hospice spiritual care director. I was a pastor, worked ambulance, those type of things, everything. So had some background, but just compelled to do the podcast and everything. Never knew all the things that were going to spring out of this, and then dealing with the grief as well. And what really came on me, and in the grief space and the grief educators out there, is that we're all trying to really get grief to be more normalized in the conversation, right? And I see that in a lot of the work that you're doing, and getting into the schools and talking to them, because we're all going to deal with it, right? Unless we unless we leave this world first in some way. So, and other societies certainly do. They it's more normalized in their conversation, more normal in just their being and their state of being. And so, I really appreciate all of that and what you're doing and all that work. I thought about that. I offered, I'm offering my services here to speak at workplaces and wherever it may be. I entertain in nursing homes, and I'm a singer and performer. So I presented it to them. And you know how many, all three of them like jumped on it right away, and they want to do monthly groups and this type of thing, because the context of grief and so many different things, like you mentioned, it doesn't matter. It can be so many, you know, uh, so many things of loss, that you grieve, you go through the grieving process with, really. So, so there's the staff, there's the family members, there's the people themselves who have lost independence, all those kind of things. So, and I saw that was on your site too, where you talked about these different facets. There's grief from a death, and then there's all these other things that grief can be applicable to, you know?
Absolutely. And again, it's processing all the other stuff. There's an author by the name of Ware, and came out in 2019, 2012, and then 2019. It was the 5 regrets of the dying, and I have to share this because I saw it earlier in the year, and I'm presenting it here in Montreal this week. It was basically the 5 regrets of the dying, and between ages of 70s and 80, and they're in ages of 70s and 80s. And number 3, because there's 5, but I have to point out 3 because we're on this podcast, was I wish I was able, and this was male and female, I wish I was able to express myself more when I was younger, when I was living. And I just thought that was so profound, because I call it grief inheritance. Who taught us how to grieve?
Nobody.
We didn't know that our children were going to die, our parents, our friends, our colleagues, but who taught us that? And so how are we having this conversation? What are the tools? And so I look at that and I go, wow, they're saying it still today. And at number 3, they're saying, I just wish I could express myself more and share my feelings. I just thought it was powerful.
Yeah, I try to explain to people when they ask me about that, and I say we need to be more proactive. And I said, you know what? People can be better educated, because we're going to encounter it in so many different ways. You might be around a grieving person, and you can handle that better if you're better educated about it all. You may be a grieving person, and then it'll apply that way. So there's just so many ways that it can penetrate and be part of a better enhanced situation. It's not going to take away the pain or anything like that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about just being better equipped. Maybe you won't say those
Absolutely.
things that hurt people, in your good
Yeah.
intentions and those type of things as
Yeah.
someone around someone or whatever the case is. But hello, friends. I just wanted to take a brief break here in the podcast to make you aware of a very exciting partnership that Heroes in Grief has just formed, and that is with Get Griefy Magazine. I'm going to let their founder and editor-in-chief, Kara Sanchez, tell you all about it.
Hey, Heroes in Grief listeners. Life after loss isn't easy, but it can be colorful and full of possibilities. Meet Get Griefy Magazine, a vibrant resource filled with inspiring stories of life after loss, expert advice, and voices from everyday grievers and thought leaders. Together, they're here to help guide you toward the side of life that's left to be lived fully and authentically. Dive into Get Griefy for free on issue or snag a print copy on Amazon. Connect with us on Instagram at Get Griefy Magazine or visit getgriefymagazine.com to explore, join our thriving small business collective, or discover advertising opportunities. Let's embrace life after loss, boldly and together.
And now back to our episode. There's just so much that can be enhanced. And I think,
Mm-hmm. There's language, but you're also talking about connections. And that's where like the doers, like all your guests, they're contributing again to the community and society by being available and becoming doers, but also giving information and being supportive. And that's part of the normalcy and the commonality of the gifts of the people that have been on your podcast, just spreading the word. I mean, it's going to take forever, but grief is forever. And at least, they're doing it.
It's stigmatized. Grief is a stigmatized thing in our society.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, we're all trying to break that. I say there's a glass ceiling there in that case. And so we're trying to get through that. And, because you put things that you probably encountered this, you put things out there and people, they don't want to talk about it until something happens. They're good with reactionary.
Yeah.
They're good reactionary to grief,
Yeah.
but we're talking about getting proactive in it. You can talk about these things ahead of time. You can get things out there. And you know what? Like you've encountered for sure, you're going to find out. You talk to that group, and there's going to ones come out of there who need to deal with it. Then it's not something they're waiting for later on. It's something that they haven't done yet, and they need to deal with. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
awesome stuff. Yeah, the people on here, it's been awesome. And that was
awesome.
how it was brought to me, where it's like the stories really meant things to me. Of course, there's power in the stories. And so I have them, share their story. And then the amazing thing, I started seeing all these amazing things that people are doing. And I'm like, this has to get out there, because there's something for everybody. There's something someone can relate to.
Absolutely. There is.
They're going to connect.
I was going through it. There's.
Yeah. And you got artists, you've got dancers, you've got, all different kinds of things that people can do that can help them in their situation. So it's just great. It's awesome. So, why don't you explain a little bit more about what you offer through the Solace Tree? And because I saw everything from, your local things you're doing naturally to things that branch out to online things and stuff like that too. So what are you all offering through the Solace Tree?
Well, we have our peer support groups, which, every other week people come to our organization, all ages, 3 to, we have an 87-year-old in there. We have school programs. We go into the schools, K through 12, and we do support groups. And then we also do professional developments for staff. We've really tried to break in doing a community, how to parent your grieving child, but our school district is just not a fan of it. And I was told that they're not going to do grief. And I was a little disappointed because they've let us in their schools now for 23 years. So I can tell you, I'm not going to give up on it. I'm going to keep pushing that. But we're doing it our own organization. We're doing it when we speak and we go places. But in our own communities and counties, people are saying, gosh, how do you support your grieving child when your child died and then you have they have a sibling, or it's been difficult. So we're doing that. We're going to start a program in 2026. This is really cool. it's the family members of the participants that want to come. We're going to feed them because it's hard to get people to be there and talk about stuff,
Yep.
right? But it's the family members of the participants, so they can learn a little more about what their family members going through, because they're not getting it at home. Just like, I have to believe that all the listeners know this too, that even the coworkers, nobody wants to hear the stories. Nobody
Yep.
wants to know why you're still gone 2 weeks later, or you're having a grief burst. We call them a grief burst when you're in your car, you hear a song, you smell food, you have a memory of your son or your spouse, and all of a sudden you can't. You just can't. You need a moment. And no one really understands that. Well, we're at dinner or you're late. It's all the things, and nobody understands that. So we're going to start doing that in 2026, because family members just have a problem with some of the participants and why they're still grieving a year, 2, 3 years later, even after they're remarried, even if they had another child, even after they're like, but you look like you've moved on. It seems like you've moved on. How are you still? They just don't get
Right.
it. And it goes back to the grief I call it grief inheritance. Who taught you how to grieve? And what was that like? Your first loss and your first death, because there's death and everything else is secondary. So we're going to do that. I'm excited about it, because just family members, same with coworkers. They don't understand. We've been working together for years, but now your mom died, you're a parent. Shouldn't you be okay with it? It's been 6 months or 2 years. You're still sad. Your mom lived in California, or your brother lived in Texas. So we're doing those programs. We do national Zooms on suicide, first responders, and just men. I believe, and I've learned this because everything I'm sharing with you is lessons learned. Emilio doesn't know all this. Emilio and the Solace Tree have learned it over the 23 years. Men have more unprocessed grief than women. We were raised differently than them. We love differently than them. We were taught differently than them through sports and school. Things are just different. And so I do a Zoom with them, and then that's it. We're just doing professional developments. We still try and speak when we can, and when there's grief in the workplace. We still have our grief camp. We're just doing all the things that a grieving center should be doing to help out the community. But again, I always go back to society. A lot of these people will move on. And our whole program is free. We raise money, so nobody has to worry about a dime. The only one who pays for it is the school, because I've seen budgets, and schools have money. And so for $2,000 a year, they're getting everything. And for our whole organization, camp and peer support groups, our books, we just give it all for free. So no one has to worry about even our snacks and dinners. We just raise the funds so people can just come and be a part of another family, or a new family, if you will. A club that nobody wants to belong to be honest,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
A club that
got that right. So yeah, the men's portion of it, I love having you on, because I don't have a whole lot of men on. You know how it is in the grief education circles.
I saw that.
Well, most of them are women. They tend to be able to relate more openly and better, as you mentioned. So a lot of the grief educators are women that I find, but I've been very fortunate to be part of helping fathers heal. It's an offshoot of helping parents heal, which is those who have lost children, and they have a wonderful men's group, and I'm very privileged to be involved in that. And so my healing process has been incredible with that. Yeah, we have a Zoom session every Wednesday night, and 30 to 50 guys on there every single, from all over the world, and it's amazing. So
awesome.
Yeah, and you're right, and we all recognize it too, and so we're trying to help expand that in that regard anyways. But it's so true, and I love having guys on, and I've had other educators who have been on with me, or those in the grief space, and they've said I love this that you're doing it as a guy, and so it's like, well, I'm just me. I can't help that, but but it is right, and I think it gives them kind of license to say, yeah, maybe I do need to look at this and deal with this, so that's great. And the parent part is there such a thing as the PTA anymore in school? I don't even know, but
No, it's called something
Yeah,
else.
but
No,
that
it's
involves
not
the school,
PTA.
doesn't it?
It's
So they still could squelch that or
yes,
whatever. Yeah.
yes.
And so I'm just thinking of ways you might be able to get through to them. I'm sure you're thinking of all of them, but yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But and everything.
And we've tried, and we've been in some schools because of PTA money, but the school district as a whole is like, it's called Parent University, and they're just like, we're just not doing it. We're not doing grief. And it's sad because they've let us in their schools for 23 years, but they just don't want a class. And trust me, I had to say this, and I tried to see if they bite, but I said, don't worry about it. We've learned all this information. We're just going to give it away for free. It's just like a webinar or a presentation or a workshop, and you don't even have to pay us. It's okay. And they're like, we're just not doing it. So pretty sad
You know
about
what
that,
though?
because it's not about us anymore. It's about all the families, the 70,000 kids in the school
Yeah.
district.
And you know what? You probably could just say, well, we'll be here when you call because they're going to call.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's what we
Right.
did. That's what we do. And we're still here.
Yeah,
We're
unfortunately,
still
right?
here.
When the circumstance arises, and and that's what I was talking about, the reactionary to proactive side. And they're very eager to call when something happens, of course, but and that's fine. That's good. But so what about the sports aspect that you have worked with?
Yeah.
What's that's a
Yeah.
very unique avenue with all of this. So what's going on with that?
It's something new for us. It's something that's needed. The hidden stage is the golf course, the football field, the court. It's the hidden stage of grief. Nobody's talking about it. I know coaches are busy. I used to coach, and I know athletes are concentrating. They don't think anybody knows what they're going through. They're trying to focus on school and sport. We need to be available. And we started seeing that after COVID, some athletes in our own community, and I teach at the university, by the way, University of Nevada, Reno. So I had athletes in my classes, and my classes, I had 2 classes. It's helping children and teens cope with death and loss. It was an grad class. That was my first class. And my other class was death and dying, life and living. It's what the heart and brain go through when it's grieving. It's the developmental stages, actually, but it's all about death and dying, life and living. And it was an elective, and it's an undergrad and grad class, but it's also an elective for psychology, counseling, nursing, social work, and all of a sudden these athletes started showing up just before the pandemic. And in my class, they have to write their own eulogy, they have to create their own funeral, they have to write their own obituary. We do field trips. We talk about current events. The research project is researching something other than your own culture and your religion. So if you're Catholic and you're Italian, research someone from the Philippines. And maybe talk about Shiva, the way for grieving and the wake and everything when somebody dies in the Jewish community. Just because we can't just keep doing what white people do, and because I bring that up because when I first started this 24 years ago, they said, don't leave your day job. You're just going to see white people. No Mormons are going to come see you. No African American, Black people are going to see you. I'm like, well, you'll see. I hope I don't see them, but we're going to provide this space for them. They get it from their own pastors and their churches and their own religion. They have their own traditions and cultures. I'm like, well, you'll see. And the Dungy Center taught me that. It was really just trusting the process. And let me tell you, they've come because we've built it. So now these athletes get to study this stuff, and then they get to present, and they're also crying because their grandmother died or their dad died when they were in elementary school or middle school or high school, and they never grieved it, Tom. So now they get to share in a safe space. So we really started going into working with athletic teams, especially in our high schools, the University of Nevada, Reno athletes, and then, athletes that are in middle school that also have had a death. We've done some sports psychology, if you will, but we've really just tried to get in and help the parents or caregivers or coaches just check in with these athletes. And that's what we're finding out is they need to know they're not alone. So providing space, reminding them that we're here to listen. I'm not asking coaches and sports psychologists and all the people involved to be counselors. We're providing them tools, but we're also saying be available. And if you have to be vulnerable, like you were with me, Tom, when you talked about your son that died at 27. What's your son's
Jeff.
name? When you talked about Jeff, thank you for sharing that. It's being vulnerable. And now we can have a conversation like, oh, you've also had someone die in your life. And then all of a sudden it starts to do this. And then that student athlete or that coach can go, wow, I can come talk to you, Tom, or I can come talk to you, Emilio, because you've shared something very, private with me. Even though what we say here stays here, I want you to know if you ever want to talk, I'm here to listen. And that's what we're trying to do. Check in with the athletes. It's a text message. It shows up at practice, going to the games, just letting them know that they're available. And that's been our biggest thing. And that's why I'm speaking today or this week at the Association for Applied Sports Psychology in Montreal. It's about, death and grief and trauma and loss and athletes and what they're experiencing. We don't talk about it enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get in. I set up a special interest group. I had 18 people, almost 20, 18 people show up because they want to start doing research. They want to start doing things in their own programs, their own schools, University of Denver, UCLA, Ithaca College. So it's a great start. That's what we're doing. We're opening the doors now. We're letting people know we can talk about this. It's going to be uncomfortable, but let's get this thing started because no one was doing it.
Yeah, and why wouldn't they want to? The headspace for sports, obviously, your focus and everything else. And if you can enhance that, it's only going to help things, So that's awesome. Wow. You know what? And you mentioned too that, opening up those doors by being vulnerable. And so, what you find is that people want to talk. They want to talk about these things.
Me too.
And you just, you just got to give them the door or the ability. Like, here it is. Let's talk. And sure, I've always got those people around you, the non-grief people, around you and all that.
Yeah.
But more times than not, you find people that all of a sudden they just open up about it, and they start spilling it out.
And it's providing that space and permission. And once earlier today, we offered a SIG to anyone in trauma, grief, and loss to just come and let's say. Every single one of them said, thank you for doing this. And I said, absolutely. I said, it's for all of us because we needed to do something different in the sports arena, the sports psychology world. It's not just for clinicians. There's nothing wrong with having clinicians, counselors, and therapists. There's nothing wrong with it. But we also need to know that coaches and staff and athletic trainers are also available. Mm-hmm. We're here to listen, not counsel. And that's what's been so successful with this past 5 years. And then all of a sudden now we're going to bring it to the sports psychology world.
And all those therapists and all those grief is not a required thing for them as far as in their learning curriculum, so people always need to be aware of that. Ask questions if you're going to talk to somebody, see what their background is, see if they have any experience in this area, because a lot of them may not. And so it's all right to move on to somebody else, if you need to do that.
And we talk about that. That's a very fair statement, because it doesn't have to be because they're a psychologist or clinician, because they could not be ready that day too. They could just be going and just regular. All of a sudden it's the anniversary of their son or their mom. They're an adult's anniversary, or something bad just happened 2 weeks later, but they need to work to put money, food on the table, but they're dealing with their grief and it hasn't been processed since 2009 or 1994. And all of a sudden someone's like, my mom just died, my child just died, and I want to talk about it. And it's like, well, we got 50 minutes and I'm just not ready for it. So we just have to have them be mindful of who they're talking to.
They could activate them in some way, or they could just be going through the motions because of their dealing with whatever they're dealing with. So yeah. Wow. Amazing. Thank you, Amelia. Yeah. Amazing stuff. I mean, is there anything else you want to talk about? Because I know that you're focused in Reno and the things in the Nevada area and all of that, but you do online things, right? For anybody on there. So I want to make sure that people know that.
It's free.
Yeah, there's free. Yeah. There's those are the peer-to-peer groups that are online.
Yes, peer-to-peer groups run by people who've had death in their life. They've had a spouse die, a child die. They're an adult. They've had a parent die. So all the feelings, everyone's going through different developmental stages. You might be on there, even with first responders. They might be late 20s or 40s, and the one who's running the groups might be 60 or 30, but they've been through that. They've had all that experience, and they're just there to listen. It is the club that nobody wants to belong to, but grief is such a small word for such a big feeling, a big experience. It's not to fix, it's to feel, and that's what we're doing here, and that's why it's so important. I do want to mention one thing that motivated me after 9/11. 9/11 motivated me. We needed to do something. I learned so much about the military over the years, too, because I set up a program in New York, and I went to New York, down in Manhattan, on the 5-year anniversary. Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, was doing this work alongside and even before Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. That was a medical model, the 5 stages of grief. But this was great about Mr. Rogers is way back in the day, because we actually started our programs in preschools. I started a program called First Losses, First Feelings. I knew that preschool teachers got 0 training, and I knew that parents were like, I just had a baby. The baby's 3, but now the sibling died, or the dog died, or we just ran over a dead, skunk or raccoon. So what's that conversation like? Well, Fred Rogers, if you ever see his documentaries, they had a tough time getting him to talk about death. He wrote a book and did a video on death of a goldfish, death of a parent, death of a pet. They didn't want to do it. If you look at the documentary, it says it all right there. He was so adamant. He's like, well, then I'm done. They're like, well, Fred, you're going to talk about death. I don't know. So he was writing all these things. And here's what he said. And this was such a great quote from him. And I used it through my preschool 23 years ago. And I still use it today if I have to, when people are working with children. He said, what's mentionable is manageable, and what's manageable is mentionable. Kids will talk to you about anything as long as they know that you're listening and you're present. This was in the late 60s,
Wow.
Tom. And I thought it was so beautiful, because when we went in to talk to preschoolers ages 3 to 5, and I let them know who I was and why I was here, we talked about that empty desk. There was an empty desk in there. A child had died. We also talked about the death of a parent, who the parent was doing parent patrol, or was volunteering, or who was cooking and bringing in snacks, or the soccer coach, for fun, doing some activities, not soccer, PE coach, just for fun, so the kids can run around. Now, this was back in the day. So when I heard that quote, I'm like, that's it. This is going to be tough. It's going to be a tough journey. I mean, here we are 24 years later as a nonprofit, 23 years later. But when I heard that, the preschool children, these kids are now in their 20s. And I'll tell you right now, I've got 2 volunteers from it. There's also the ones that came through it when they were tweens, our volunteers. They're also social workers, the psychologists, one's going to med school. It's because we provided that space, but we listened to them, and it was mentionable and it was manageable. So we did it. And that's what we gave to parents as tools. And so it's worked out, and we're successful, because we're saving lives. And I do want to say this, because it's a big piece when I use that word, saving lives. If it wasn't for providing the space to talk about death, we wouldn't have had 14 cases of incest 23 years later. That's how powerful sitting there and listening and providing space. And so I'm honored to be a part of it. But just like when you shared the name of your son and sharing Jeff, and all the people that we get to listen to, it's a privilege, Tom.
It absolutely is. And, you talked about the peer-to-peer situation. I love that too. And it can be just as effective as a professional counselor and things for some people. It all depends how you relate to the person and how whatever you gravitate to. And so I always open that up for everybody, find your place. There's a place out there. That's what this whole thing is about, this podcast and everything. There's so many things available to people. Keep searching and find your place, So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Wow.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. It's been such an honor. Good stuff.
Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate it. We connected connected online there. And no, it's
absolutely.
I love what you're doing, and definitely support it all. I want everybody to go to solacetree.org and look up Emilio's work and all the things that are available. Maybe you want to be part of things. You can do that too. And, you can financially support things if you want, or you can look into, there's lots of free offerings on there, and a lot of, you've written some books too, right? We didn't get to that yet. You wrote some books.
Yeah. We've written some books. We've written books with kids, for kids, and it's just journaling. We felt like when we started, the kids were writing, we're like, oh my gosh, just create journal. We've written 7 books for children and teenagers to talk about and work through suicide, death of a pet, death of a parent, death of a friend. It's just, that's been a great part too, is sitting down with these kids and have them contribute, give back based on what they want a grief book to look like. It's journaling.
Yeah. Wow. Great stuff. So everybody, you got resources, So how many times you hear people, oh, I wish I had that, or I wish I found something, right?
Yeah.
Here it is, folks, and spread the word. If you know somebody else, I mean, I always think about the podcast of the people who are watching, and they're the ones that it's for, but there's people out there who who we can push it out to. So please share it and do that, or the resources, whatever the case.
And thank you, Tom. And just for the listeners, we have access to every grief center in the world. So when someone reaches out to us and they need something in Omaha, Nebraska, or Australia, or London, England, or Seattle, you name it, we've got grief resources for children all the way to the adults, because we have that. So they can just email it. We'll just send them the information. They can just call them or log on, whatever they need to do.
That's great. I love that. I'm a resource guy, so I'm all about that.
Okay.
Love it. Yeah. And I'll keep tabs on your stuff as well, and you too, for that matter. Okay. All right.
Absolutely, Tom.
Thank you so much. Real pleasure, Emilio. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It has been a privilege. Thank you. Take care, Tom. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show, or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Sunday, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.